People always say that you have to have money to make money, and that there's an extraordinary level of sacrifice on the road to success. So how is it that investors like us, who didn't start out with much money and who don't rely on banks and credit, how is it that we can increase our income and build our wealth in a way that doesn't require us replacing one full-time job with another while still enjoying the things in life that matter most to us? That has always been the big question, and this podcast reveals the answers. I am Carrie Lake, and this is the Investor Warrior. Hey, warriors, what is up? I am here with C. Gordon Moose. So excited to have you on. Now, do you go by C or Carl?
I go by Moose. Everybody calls me Moose.
Okay, you know what's funny? I have two brothers who are half brothers, so they have a different last name. Their nickname was also Moose in school.
Both of them?
Both of them, because their last name is Muse, and so people used to say Moose all the time.
Gotcha. So, well, I have four sisters, so for my brother and I, it was a great nickname. My sister's not so much, you know what I mean? But right. We all have fun with it for sure. But no, you can call me Moose.
Okay, Moose. So thank you so much for coming on. You guys pull up a chair, have some lunch or dinner or breakfast wherever you are in the world. Grab a beer if you want to, but we're going to hang out with Moose for the next, I'd say 45 minutes to an hour. And we're going to talk real estate, but specifically we're going to talk about Napoleon Hill's Think and Grow Rich and how it relates to real estate, because Moose is an expert at Think and Grow Rich. Now, I borrowed the name Think and Grow Rich with real estate. I was actually in a Clubhouse room a few weeks ago. Tim Mai was the host of the Clubhouse room, and he had a Think and Grow Rich with real estate Clubhouse room. And at one point we had like 300 or 400 people on. It was crazy. And we went through like all of the principles and people were asking stuff. It was an amazing room. So when you contacted me to talk about this, I was really, really excited about it. We could probably go on for hours talking about this, but what I'd like to do is really condense it down. We're going to give you lots of value-packed 45 minutes here. So are you ready?
Oh, yeah, for sure. And listen, Carrie, I could talk for this stuff for hours. So I'll do my best to keep it short and sweet.
So Moose, first off, tell us a little bit about you, your journey, and how you got into the Think and Grow Rich area.
Yeah. So I got into real estate because I started off as a banker and a mortgage banker, and it was always commercial real estate. So I was one of the first guys with Washington Mutual back in the early 2000s. We opened up Chicago. Then I went to work for another bank, ABN AMRO, which is a huge Dutch bank. And so I was doing commercial mortgages, and I saw all these people, Carrie, from all different walks of life and all different education levels and ethnicities and everything, making a fortune buying apartment buildings. So I got into it. I started buying apartment buildings myself. I started putting LLCs and partnerships together. We ended up in a very short period of time, we bought about 22 buildings. And so that's how I got into the thinking or into real estate, right? Really on the multi-family side of the equation. How I got into Think and Grow Rich, it really goes back to my high school hockey career, because I had a coach who was into Think and Grow Rich, and he gave me that book. He gave us that book. He used to talk about it, but none of us ever paid attention. We were stupid young guys, and we thought we knew everything. And I wish, looking back, that I really followed some of the advice. And it wasn't until years later that I was introduced to Bob Proctor, which a lot of people know from the movie The Secret. And a lot of people don't know. Bob's pushing 90 now. He worked directly for Napoleon Hill. Napoleon Hill passed, I think, in 1978. But Bob Proctor worked for Napoleon Hill. He worked for Victor Conan and Earl Nightingale, which was Nightingale Conan Company that did all the tapes and everything else, and is still around, publishing company. But Bob was my real connection, and really, I did a 3-year program with Bob. Actually, I did a 1-year program, and then it ended up being a 3-year relationship with Bob. But he was really the guy that opened my eyes to this gem of a book that was written back, at the turn of the century, by Napoleon Hill, which was a guy that he interviewed hundreds and hundreds of successful men and women and people that were not so successful. And he just basically documented what they kept telling him. And they came up with these 13 principles of success. And I realized that in my hockey career and in my relationships and in my, all areas of my life where I was successful, I was actually using these principles, even though back then I couldn't tell you what the principles were or articulate the way I can now, because I've literally been studying this for over 2 decades now. And so it's really amazing. And, for those of you that have read the book, that in the introduction, Napoleon Hill says, he says, I never met somebody that was successful that didn't use these principles. And I've never met somebody that used these principles that didn't eventually become successful, whether they knew the principles or not. And the point of that is these principles are universal.
Yep. Yeah, no, absolutely. And so Think and Grow Rich is one of those books that I try to read like once a year, because every time you read it, you get something new out of it, depending on where you are in your life, right?
Yeah.
And I practice everything that he says to do. So we have an index card by the side of our bed, which has the Napoleon Hill Think and Grow Rich statements that you read every morning and every night before you go to bed. Yeah. And we do that. And it's funny because we went to a Tony Robbins event one time, and what's his name? Oh gosh, the speaker who was speaking there. Anyways, he said, the only thing that sets me apart from you, if you're not successful and I am, is the fact that I take what I learn and I actually use it and I actually implement it. And he was talking about how Think and Grow Rich was one of the books that got him off the streets. He was literally homeless, and it got him off the streets. And now he's a speaker with Tony Robbins. And he said, I literally just did everything that Napoleon Hill told me to do in that book. And now I'm here standing in front of you when I was on the streets reading this book.
Yeah.
And he said, well, that's all it was, is I just implemented it.
Yeah. Well, the beautiful thing about the book is Napoleon Hill took 20 years, and I can tell you the whole story, but I don't think we have time. He took 20 years doing the research for the book and didn't get paid a nickel. He did it on the challenge of Andrew Carnegie, which at the time was the second wealthiest man in North America, behind John D. Rockefeller. And by the way, just by comparison, they're worth about, those back then in equivalent dollars, they're worth about 4 times or 5 times what Bezos is worth. So they were as wealthy as Bezos is. They were 4 or 5 times as wealthy back in the turn of the century. And Napoleon Hill interviewed Andrew Carnegie, and Andrew Carnegie said, I want you to write a book for the common person that is about the laws of success, and I'll introduce you to all these people. So he went on a 20-year quest and really just documented what people told him. And the beautiful thing about it, Carrie, is, like you said, it is actually a blueprint. Every single chapter in the book, and there's roughly 16 chapters from the introduction, the preface up to the epilogue. Every single chapter has at least 1 or 2 exercises that you can implement in your life, right? And the way my training program came about, which is called Find Your Focus, it's all based on the principles of Think and Grow Rich, right? That's the foundation of my coaching or my training. It basically came out of me just personally taking the exercises out of each and every chapter while I worked through it with a year-long program with Bob Proctor, and making my own notes, because I said, oh, there's the principle. There's how, there's the exercise on leadership, the 11 tenets of leadership in the chapter on organized planning, or here's the analysis, the self-analysis, or the alibi exercise, or the desire formula, which is what you pointed to. The 6th step is reading it every morning and every night, right? That's the 6th step of the 6-step desire formula. So it all came out of just implementing those exercises, because they're right there. He gives you the blueprint, and if you follow the blueprint and you just do what he tells you to do, you will succeed. You don't have a choice. This happens by natural law. You don't. It's not. It's just what will happen. You will succeed if you follow the instructions in that book.
Yeah, I agree, and I'd love to talk more about. You're the focus guy. And in a world of distractions, I think that we could all use a little bit more focus in our life.
Yeah.
Because we are being pulled in all different directions. We now have Clubhouse, all these social media platforms. If you're trying to run a business and grow a family like we are, it's just constantly being pulled. And so how do you use these principles to focus in on what you need to do to be successful?
Well, I go right back to Napoleon Hill. It's what I call desired-based focus, right? Desired-based focus, right? The first chapter of the book is the chapter on desire, right? Really understanding what you want, right? And beyond that, why do you want it, right? What are you going to give in return, right? The law of compensation. You don't get unless you give. You have to give first, right? The law of reciprocity. Whatever you give is what you're going to get, right? You give love, you're going to get love. You give negativity, you're going to get negativity, right? The law of increasing return, right? The more you put one kernel of corn in the ground, you don't get one kernel, you get 10,000 kernels, right? One acorn doesn't produce one acorn, it produces a tree that produces 1,000,000 acorns. It's the same thing. So it all starts with really knowing what you want and why you want it, right? And where I start with people is we look at the 5 areas of your life, the 5 key areas of your life. And I'll be more than happy to make this available to your audience. But just real quickly, it's your relationships, number 1, your health and your wellness, right? Your health being your body, your wellness being your mind, right? The next is your education, your profession. The next one is your money or your income or your revenue, your finances. And the last one is your spirit, whatever that is to you. So breaking it out and deciding and really making a decision. What do I want in my relationships, right? What do I want in my real estate career? What do I want with my finances, right? What do I want with my health and my wellness? What do I want with my spirit? So when you break that elephant down, into those bites, and then you can figure out what you desire, and then you can focus based on that desire. When you keep that desire, right? And if anybody read The Secret or watched The Secret, it said dream vision board. If you came into my condominium, I have at least 4 that I can think of vision boards, right? I have one for my family, I have one for my wealth, I have one for my business, right? And one's hanging on my they're just all over the place. So even though I don't consciously look at them all the time, I'm subconsciously surrounded by that, and that keeps me focused and grounded because it's based on my desires. So when you are crystal clear, and I know you are, Carrie, when you're crystal clear on what you want, why you want it, and what you're willing to give in return, all the other distractions go right out the window because you are focused, right? And it's that burning desire, like Napoleon Hill talks about, and you keep it present all the time, right? And that's how you maintain your focus. And it's all about finding your focus. Number 1, that's that desire part, maintaining your focus, right? And then sustaining it long term. So when people ask me that question, it's all about desire-based focus.
Awesome. It's funny. I first started out reading The Secret. That's where I got really into spirituality, and the law of attraction was through the book The Secret. And you can go onto their website and you can print out the universe checks from the universe. And so my husband and we printed out a check from the universe off of their website. And at the time we put a number on it, and it was a pretty big number. It was like triple what we were currently making. And we put it in our bathroom, and every day we looked at it, and it's crazy. I swear, Moose, it worked. And within a year, we hit that number. And I can't tell you how, I can't tell you what exactly did, but it was like the universe came together. Yeah. We started putting things in action because we saw that every morning. And it was just such a great exercise. And that is how we got started really in our business, was printing out that check from the universe.
Yeah. Did you see The Secret? Have you seen The Secret?
I haven't seen the movie, but I watched I read the book a few times back in the day.
Can I tell you a real quick story about that?
Yeah.
So Bob Proctor, who's the main guy in the movie, right? They were trying to get him for about 6 months, and their schedules couldn't jive, right? So I was in a year-long program with Bob where every quarter we'd go to a different place. Well, what happened, we were in Aspen, right? We were spending a weekend in Aspen, and we were doing all kinds of workshops and stuff. And it was in the spring, or it was in July. And we were riding down the gondola, and it was me and Bob and another couple from Chicago. We were the only 4 people in the gondola. And Bob, if you ever meet him, is cool as a cucumber because he's in total control of his thoughts and his feelings and his actions, right? And he was flustered, right? And this is probably a 20-minute gondola ride. And I'm sitting next to him. I look at him and said, Bob, I said, are you afraid of heights? And he said, no. He said, why do you ask me that? I said, because I've known you for a while. I've never seen you flustered before, right? What's going on? He goes, we just filmed something that is literally going to change the world. He said, I can't tell you about it right now, but it's going to change the world. What he was referring to is they just filmed his portion of The Secret in Aspen while we were there. Right now, the way that whole thing came about is when he finally got in touch with the woman in Australia that was the producer. She said, oh, we missed the boat. We've already got everybody scheduled. We start shooting next week. And he said, well, where are you going to start shooting? And she said, we're going to start in Aspen. And he said, I'm going to be in Aspen next week, right? So what's the moral of the story? The moral story is the law of attraction, right? And that's the whole thing. But I told Bob after I saw the movie a year later, I said, Bob, they missed something. They missed something in the movie. He said, you know what they did? He said, they missed the law of action, right?
Yes.
And I said, what do you mean? He said, well, the law of attraction is you working on the universe. I'm sorry, is the universe working on you? The law of action is you working on the universe. And he said, they go together. You know, if you can wish and hope all day long, but if you don't get into action, it's not going to happen. So, and listen, I'm with you. Those checks from the universe, that's what keeps reminding you, right, on that subconscious level. But it's you and your husband getting into action that made that happen. The universe just creates the pathway. But if you don't take the steps, Carrie, it's never gonna happen.
Yeah, and it creates the desire, right? It reminds us to visualize what it is that we want, because it's so easy to desire something, but throughout the day to completely forget what it is or to stop visualizing what it is that we want. And so it was just really a reminder for us. Every time we went into that bathroom, we saw the check and we were like, okay, what do we need to do today to get that number? So yeah, and I agree that The Secret did have that missing component, and that is not only thinking it, but creating it, right? And taking steps and taking action towards it. But I truly feel like if there's enough desire, if there's enough passion, you are going to be naturally pulled to something, right? We're either being pushed to something or we're being pulled to something. When you're being pushed to something and you feel like you're constantly pushing and it's work, that's usually when you give up, right? But when you have a desire that's so big and a passion that is so big, it just naturally pulls you towards it, even through the challenges, even though you're going to have days where you're like, this sucks.
Yeah.
But you wake up the next day and it's like, you can't stop no matter what.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter what challenges there are. And
it creates that expectation, like Esther Hicks talks about, that expectation, right? And Napoleon Hill in the book talks about a thought and becoming a desire like a child. Like it's like birthing a child, right? At first it's there, you don't even know it's there. And then all of a sudden it starts to grow within you. And then all of a sudden it's born into the world. And then you have to take care of it. If you don't take care of that newborn, it will perish, right? Well, same with your desire, same with your thoughts. And then at some point in the life of that child, it takes on a life of its own, right? It gets its own personality. And that's the same thing with a thought or with a desire. It starts within you, right? And you nurture it and you feed it and eventually it's born into the world, and then you nurture it, right? And then at some point you wake up and go, oh my God, this thing has taken on a life of its own, and it becomes bigger than you, right? And it's not about just you. And that's the exciting part. But, and most people don't really understand that dynamic. So they do, they run into challenges and they decide to quit, right? And I know that you know this from the book, but also from your life. Temporary defeat is one thing, right? Or temporary failure is one thing. Defeat is a different thing. Defeat is when you decide to quit. Failure is the first step of success. If you're not willing to fail, you're never going to succeed. So the challenge is most people, when they run into a barrier or an obstacle, or the universe throws them a curveball just to test their resilience, right? Their persistence, they decide to quit. And that's when you're done. Right? Yeah. If you accept failure as a stepping stone to success, you will succeed. I mean, look at Thomas Edison, which is one of the people that Napoleon Hill interviewed. A newspaper asked him one time, he said, well, you failed 10,000 times in finding the filament for your light bulb. He said, no, I didn't. He said, I just learned how not to do it. Right? Yeah. Failure in his mind was just a step to ultimate success. And that's where people fall off. And that's part of that maintenance and part of that sustaining side of focus, because that's where, when you lose your persistence, or when you lose your focus, on your desire, that's when the universe is going to trip you up.
Yeah. And it took Napoleon Hill how many years to finish that book? Was it 20?
Well, it took him 20 years to write the first edition, which, by the way, was called The Laws of Success. It was 16 laws. It was 1,000 pages. It was about this thick. I've actually read that too. It was a very difficult read. The editor said no one's ever going to read that. So it took another 8 years to take 1,000 pages and pare it down to about 250. So in all, it was about 28 years.
Yeah. And you have to have a passion if you're going to do that for 28 years. I mean, and I am guessing that he ran into some challenges along the way. And I think he even talked about that in the book. But this is what he was consistent. He was passionate. He had this end goal and he wasn't going to stop until he met that goal. And I think most of us give up. It's like that 3 feet from gold concept. Most of us give up when we're 3 feet from gold because we just feel like we've been going at this for long enough. I'm never going to make it. There's just going to be more challenges. And a lot of successful people who have said this quote is that most people overestimate what they can do in a year and underestimate what they can do in a decade. And like this book, he's writing the principles, but he's also like proving the principles. He's actually acting out on the principles as he's writing this book, which I love because he had to embody these principles in order to publish the book. And
100.
Look at what a success this book was.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. And it's so true. And Greg Reed and Sharon Lechter, who was Robert Kiyosaki's CEO and original founder, one of the founders of the Rich Dad Poor Dad, they wrote a book called 3 Feet from Gold, and it talks exactly about that story. That he talks about a guy named Darby that during the gold rush went out and hit a vein of gold and then quit when the vein shifted, right? And then so it comes right out of Think and Grow Rich. And he talks about how we're 3 feet from our success and we decide to quit, right? Yeah. Or another great one's Acre of Diamonds, which I forget who wrote that, but it talks about all the gems that are just below the surface that are in our own little backyard, we don't need to go outside of ourselves. The acres of diamonds are right below the surface. You just have to be willing to dig. And Napoleon Hill, absolutely. I mean, his wife almost divorced him. He was bankrupt during this period. He got paid nothing. He was out of pocket for all his expenses. I mean, it's a phenomenal story. And you know what the interesting thing is? If you read the modern version, there's been 47 editions of the book. If you read a modern version that incorporates stories about Steven Spielberg and Steve Jobs and some other more popular people of the day today, you'd think the book was written yesterday, but it wasn't. And the beautiful thing is, Carrie, these principles are timeless. They're ageless. And by the way, these, if you go back to study Marcus Aurelius, who was the first Caesar of Greek, or Buddha, or Su Lao, or any of these people from 1,000 years ago, they were talking about the same thing. These principles are universal, and they work no matter who you are, no matter what your education is, no matter what your background is, doesn't matter. They work. And I'll tell you, I can tell you story after low points in my life, which got me through is these principles. These principles I use every day. I'm teaching them to my children. I have the benefit of leading courses where people rely on me to facilitate the conversations. And one of the reasons I do that is because I can't facilitate a conversation about persistence, or about faith, or about imagination, or about the mastermind, the subconscious mind, the brain. These are all the names of the chapter of the book. I can't facilitate a conversation with a group of people without practicing them myself. So they're just really phenomenal.
Yeah, it's interesting that you said that you teach it to your kids because one of my, I think it was my 6-year-old, wanted to give up on something. This was just a few months ago too. And I had just read Napoleon Hill's Outwitting the Devil. So it was kind of fresh. Napoleon Hill was kind of fresh in my mind. And when he wanted to quit, I told him about the 3 feet from gold story. And he was like, what? And I told him like everything that happened. And he was really open to it and really receptive to it. And we talked about how we just give up too easy in our society. And I think it all starts when we're kids. We just decide, oh, it's too challenging, we're going to give up. And then we grow up with that same mentality, is if it's too challenging, we're going to give up. And so I also teach some of these principles to our kids. But the other thing that I wanted to bring up too is, you talk about like Steve Jobs and a couple other successful people who embodied these principles. But what I love that you do is you talk about the whole person. You talk about how Napoleon Hill, there was a lot of sacrifices in his life, right, to write this book. And there were sacrifices with his personal life, it sounds like, where his wife was about to divorce him, where he went through bankruptcy. But you can practice these principles without sacrificing other parts of your life, whereby you use the principles for all areas of your life. It's not just in business, right? And that's where we become a just a whole person, right, in every aspect of our life. And we did this activity at an event that I went to where you have a wheel, right, and it has all the different parts of your life, and you have to shade in from 1 to 10 where you are in the wheel. So if you're down here at a 2, you're here. If you're up here at a 10, you're here. And then you look at the wheel, and a wheel's got to be smooth, right, to run efficiently. And if you've got a 2 down on your marriage and a 10 up in business and a 2 down here in your health, well, that wheel is not going to run really well, right? It's going to be a bumpy road.
Yeah.
The goal is to like take these principles and apply them to every aspect of your life, not just your business life or your career.
Yeah. Well, and that's, that's one of the things that and again, I understand because the book was written back in the early 1900s. It was originally published in 1927, right? So it was a different environment back there. The one thing I don't like about the original version, it's a little chauvinistic. It talks mostly about men.
Yep.
And he focuses on money. And, I talked to Bob about that. And Bob said, well, the thing about money is you can measure it to the penny, right? So, however, one of the things that he does allude to it in the book, and it really applies to all areas of your life. It really, really does. And Carrie, I'd be more than happy to share this. I have a little a worksheet about the 5 areas of your life and, how you can, focus on, one area, and all the ships in the harbor rise. One of the first things I do when I coach people or do the program is what we do is we decide which area you're going to work on. And I tell them, don't ever pick more than 2 of the 5, right? Just pick 1 or 2. Because if you try to, one of the reasons why we get unfocused is we try to do everything and eat the elephant all in one bite, or we're looking at too many targets, right? Just figure out which target. If it's your health that you want to have the biggest impact over the next 90 days, let's focus on your health. If it's your wealth and your business, let's focus on that, right? If it's your spiritual life or your relationship with your spouse or whoever, let's focus on that, right? So that's one of the first things we do, right? The second thing, like I said, is we say, what do you want in that specific area? And then the next step in the process is, what are you going to give? And most people get that wrong because you said the word sacrifice, right? And you're 100% correct. It's not required for you to sacrifice anything. But a lot of people, when they hear that, they think they hear give up. Yeah. And it's not, you're not giving up anything. It's you're giving in return. And there's a distinction between those two things, right? You're never going to get what you want unless you're willing to give in return, right? However, you don't have to give up anything. And that's where people get tripped up. They think, oh, I'm going to have to sacrifice or give up something over here. No, what's required for you to do is be willing to give in return. And there is a distinction there. And I just wanted to point that out because you said that. You don't have to sacrifice your marriage to be financially successful, right? You don't have to sacrifice your health to be spiritually enriched, right? So all the ships in the harbor rise when you're starting to elevate any of the areas in your life in a positive way.
Right. Yeah, it reminds me of the one thing, the domino effect, right? When you look at your life, what is the one thing that if you were to focus on that one thing, everything else in your life would improve because of that focus? So like you brought up health. Well, if I'm an unhealthy person, my relationship with my husband or my wife is probably not great. My relationship with my kids could be better because right now I'm not running around with them because my health isn't there. My finances could get better because maybe I'm sleeping too much because my health is not great, right? So it's that one thing. What is the one thing in my life that I can focus in on, by which if I focus in on that one thing, all of the other things, it's like a domino effect, improve with it.
Yeah, and it begins with you. I mean, if you're not happy with yourself, right, how can you expect? And it really does start within, right? It's the old saying, look within rather than seeking without. You know what I mean? Look within rather than seeking something that's outside of yourself. And that's the other beautiful thing about this book. It's all about mindset. Listen, you and I have talked about this before. You can have the best real estate property, the best management, the best market conditions, the best financing, the best tenants. Everything. If you've got a mixed up mindset, it's just not going to work. It may work, but it's not going to work as well as you'd like it to. So this book really talks about, and Bob Proctor says, he says, think about what you think about. Become aware of your awareness, right? And that's really what it's all about. This book is about elevating your level of awareness with regard to these principles, right? What do you desire? What do you have faith in, which is that visualization part, right? How do you use your imagination, right? Organizing your plan, right? Being persistent, right? Having specialized knowledge. How does your subconscious mind work? How does your brain work? The mastermind, your energy, right? Your sixth sense. How do you manage fear, doubt, confusion? Those, I just named all the chapters, by the way. Those are the principles. I mean, that's it right there. And when you master those and really bring those into your life, it all starts with you. If you don't have a desire to shift the way you look at things, the way you look at things will never change. Like Dr. Dyer says, right? Or Jim Rohn, I forget who said that, but the point is, it starts with you. If you don't have a desire to shift your own being and who you're being, you can't expect the universe to help you out.
Yeah. I always say that anything in life is 80% mentality, 20% strategy. And that doesn't even it's not just for business, right? It's in all aspects of our life. And that mindset is so important. And it's kind of freaky when you start becoming aware of who you really are and what you're thinking.
Yeah.
And we are only one step away. If you are a sane person, I think most of us are here, you are really only one step away from an insane person. It's just the difference is that keep it in their head and insane people actually speak it out loud.
Yeah, I'm laughing because it's funny. It becomes funny. It actually becomes funny. And I love having conversations like this. I've developed a relationship with Don Green, who knew Napoleon Hill directly. He's the chairman of the Napoleon Hill Foundation. I'm going through a certification process, just starting that, to be a trainer. There's only a handful of them out there. And I love having conversations with Don because he's a good old boy from Virginia. And he's just a super guy. But we end up talking for an hour and a half, 2 hours on the phone. And it's because besides Bob Proctor, Sharon Lecter, and Don Green, I don't know anybody out there that I've met that knows this material at that level. You know what I mean? And I'm striving to get there. And it takes a long time. My point is, when you and I have conversations about this, we can joke about it because I talk to myself. I'll say to my ego, when my ego's getting in the way and I recognize my ego's getting in the way, I'll literally stop and I won't say it out loud because, they'll lock me up, but I'll say, okay, shut up, stop that. That's just your negative thinking. It's your stinking thinking, call it whatever you want. I'll tell my ego, go sit down. I'm not listening to you right now. And it's funny because you're right. If I said that stuff out loud, they'd lock me up. You know what I mean? And you and I can laugh about it because it is funny. You start to look at your life and how ridiculous some of the things we think about are, and our limiting thoughts, our paradigms that are handed down to our parents. And we think about it and go, why do I even listen to that story? Listen, I just rented a car the other day. I got in the car and whoever was in there last had the radio blasting up and it was some nonsense music that I'd never listened to. Well, I had a choice, right? But why don't we do this in our lives? I could either sit there and listen to that nonsense music that doesn't resonate with me at a high volume, or I can turn it down and change the channel. But why don't we do that in our lives, right? Why don't we do that in our lives? What we do is we just listen to that conversation that's obnoxious and that's not really resonating with who we are, as opposed to just changing the channel, right? Which is analogous with changing our mind, right? And so, you and I can laugh about it because we know and I know you do it. I don't know you that well, but I just know from what I know, if something isn't making sense to you, or it's not vibrating with you, or it's not resonating with you, you're going to change the channel because I know the kind of person you are. And I'm sure I did it in real estate. I've walked away from deals at the closing table going, you know what? This just doesn't feel right. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going to execute, you know what I mean? And but people are hesitant to do that in their lives.
Yeah. No, I am a sane person, but I also talk to myself quite a bit. I'm like, Carrie, get out of your head. Start taking action. Right. What the hell's wrong with you today?
Right. Well, what's the old saying? It's okay to talk to yourself, but when you start answering yourself, then you know you're in trouble, right?
Well, and it really is freaky when you become aware of the conversations that you have in your head. Most of the population walks around having conversations in their head, and they don't even know they're having conversations in their head. One. Number two, you're asking questions and the same person is answering that question. Right? So that's kind of weird. and, and Keith Cunningham, I love Keith Cunningham. I got to meet him at an event, but he has the book, The Road Less Stupid. And he likes to like dumb everything down. Let's not overcomplicate this. Like even accounting, he taught accounting at this event. And it was fascinating. And I hate accounting, but I was like writing notes at midnight. He was still talking. And he talks about how, we all have these conversations in our head, but a lot of times it's chaos, like you said, where you go into this car and the radio's blaring this nonsense. That's usually what's going on in our head. And he said, here's the problem. Most of us like don't sit down and have thinking time where we just think and we ask productive questions and wait for the answers to come. So we're asking ourselves questions and then we're answering ourselves. But sometimes it takes meditation or just quiet time or just this intentional awareness of just sitting for a second and really listening to the thoughts that are going on. And usually that's when the answer comes. So he calls it thinking time.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it's the law of polarity. I mean, you can't have an in without an out, an up without a down, a hot without a cold. You can't have a question without an answer. So oftentimes I'll tell people ask me a question, well, how do you do that? I said, that's a great question. How do you think you do it? Because if you have the question, the answer will reveal itself, right? And it just takes time, but it's our ego that gets in the way, right? Our ego wants to know immediately. And it does take mental exercise to go into that space of contemplation, right? Just to contemplate the question, continue to ask yourself that question, right? And one of the greatest questions I have people ask yourself, question why? I'll ask people, well, what do you want your money? I want $1 million. Okay, why do you want that? Well, I want financial freedom. Oh, well, why do you want that? Well, because I don't want to be beholden to anybody. Okay, well, why is that important to you, right? And usually by the time you get to that fifth or sixth why, they're getting down to the real core, right? Yeah. And they start to get goosebumps, or sometimes they tear up, sometimes they laugh, right? But my point is, we normally don't ask that question and just let it sit, right? We're usually, why? And we want to jump to a conclusion, right? And we want to jump to that. And the other thing that I just want to touch upon real quick is, one of the biggest things that people get out of doing the coursework in Think and Grow Rich, when it's led and facilitated, is they get beyond their fears and they deal with negative thinking, right? So fear, doubt, confusion, indecision, and worry are the things that stop us in our lives, right? And I'll be more than happy to I have a worksheet on that as well. Any area you're stopped in your life, it's a combination of fear, doubt, confusion, indecision, and worry. And you can get beyond all 5 of those very, very quickly. I guarantee you within 30 seconds, I can tell you how to get beyond each and every one of those, right? That's real simple. It doesn't mean it's easy, but it's simple. The other thing is negative thoughts, right? And for years, I thought about this and asked people. They've actually done studies. We are more negative than we are positive. And I wondered why this is. And you know what Bob Proctor said? He said, because, Carl, you have to realize we exist on 3 separate planes. The spiritual plane, which is the highest level of vibration, the intellectual plane, which is the thought level of vibration, and the physical plane, right? And the physical plane is the lowest plane of existence, right? That's our bodies, our microphones, our computers. That's the lowest level of vibration, the lowest level of energy, right? The intellectual is a higher level. The spiritual is a higher level. He said the reason why negative thoughts will flood your mind is because we exist on the physical plane. Mm-hmm. And unless we elevate our vibration and elevate our frequency, our level of thought up to the higher plane of intellectual and spiritual thinking, negative thoughts have a open, they're just going to naturally flood into your mind. So when you flood your mind with positivity, intellectual and spiritual thoughts, positive affirmations, and really guard your mind against negativity, you get beyond that. And that's one of the biggest things that people get out of working with, someone that facilitates that conversation, because you really become aware of your negative thinking. And once you're aware of it, then you can control and direct it, and you can literally eliminate it.
Yeah, so true. And I was laughing earlier when you were going through the example of the 7 levels deep exercise, where you start to really get down to why it is you're doing something or what it is that you're doing something. And the first time I went through that exercise, where someone asked me something and I gave them an answer and they started asking me deeper questions. By the end of it, I was like, and like crying.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's so powerful.
Well, that's when you're getting down to the emotion, because here's the reality, Carrie. Human beings don't do anything unless there's an emotional connection, right? So that's when you're really getting down to that emotion. You asked me earlier about how you stay focused. When you get in touch with the emotional connection to why you're doing what you want to do, and what the emotional connection to your desire, you will move mountains. You'll be unstoppable, right? And that's the key. When you ask that question, why, and you get down to the tears or the laughter, whatever it is, right? You get energized. You're actually elevating your level of vibration because you're getting to that emotional connection, right? And that's the language of the universe. The universe speaks in emotion. It doesn't speak in English. I'll give you an example. You can look at the Mona Lisa, right? You look at the Mona Lisa, and that painting's 500 years old, but you can get connected with the emotion of the artist and the subject, because that's universal. It's timeless. It's not about English or Italian or Spanish or Greek. It's about, that's the emotional connection that connects us all. And that's what the universe responds to. When you get excited and enthusiastic about something, people will connect with you, right? The universe will open up to you, because that's the language of the universe. And that's how you maintain your focus. Get emotionally connected to your desire. Keep that present on an ongoing basis and see what happens. The universe will literally lay down in front of you.
And going back to the three planes you talked about, so you got physical, intellectual, and spiritual.
Right.
And as you go from physical up to spiritual, the frequency rises.
Yeah.
Why is it that we're so stuck in the physical? Most people are so stuck in the physical. And how can we ascend to the intellectual and spiritual?
Sure. Well, the answer to the first question is we exist on the physical plane. I mean, our bodies, our bodies are an instrument of our minds, not the opposite, right? So, however, our bodies need substance, right? We need oxygen, what I call snow, right? In order to survive, all human beings need is what I call snow, right? Sleep, nourishment, oxygen, and water. You take any one of those four away for any extended period of time, you're going to die. That's all we need to survive. But that's on a physical level. But what we really desire on an intellectual level and on a spiritual level is to thrive, right? To thrive. To thrive, there's an infinite number of things that are possible when we're in that thrive mode, when we're in that higher level of thinking, in that intellectual level, that spiritual level, where we really get outside of our physical limits and we want to thrive, right? We want to be of service to other people. We want to create and be part of something bigger than ourselves. That's why we get stuck there, right? Because we're so focused on just surviving, right? That we get stuck in that and we forget about what we're really about, our purpose, right? How do you transition that? You change the way you think, right? Our thoughts will lead to our feelings, right? Our emotions will lead to our actions. Our actions will create our results, will ultimately alter our reality. So it starts with the way you think, right? If you think that who you are is limited to how tall you are, or the color of your hair, or your weight, or how much money you have in the bank, or what kind of watch you wear, or the car you drive, or the neighborhood you live in, you are so limiting your value. You're not even in touch with who you really are intellectually and spiritually. So it really starts with shifting the way you think about yourself, right? And not being trapped by the physical limitations of our world. You can only run so fast. You can only hold your breath for so long, right? There's only certain things you can do physically. Intellectually and spiritually, you are completely and totally unlimited. You're unstoppable, right? I can't limit your thoughts, Carrie. Only you can limit your thoughts. Your thoughts are they're limitless.
Yeah.
But most people don't understand that.
Yeah, it's interesting. So just this weekend, we were in the car. We were going from football practice to swim practice. Then we had to go take a look at a house after that. And so we had the kids in the car and we're stopping at Starbucks and the chaos of the day, right? And I'm the frazzled mom and I'm like, oh, we got to get to swim press. We're going to be late. Then we're going to, we got to get fed because I don't want them complaining in front of the cellar. So I was like in my own physical world, right? And all this stress and chaos going on. And we pull up to swim class. And of course, we're 5 minutes early. And I was worrying this whole time that we were going to be late. So we had 5 minutes in the car to just hang out. And my 6-year-old and my 8-year-old were in the back of the car. And my 8-year-old was reading a science book. He's got this 1,000 cool things about science. And all of a sudden he goes, wow, did you know that the Earth rotates on its axis 1,367 miles per hour? Something. I'm not exactly sure what the number is, but it's really freaking fast. We are spinning really, really fast. And as soon as he said that, right, all of a sudden I came out of the physical plane, right? My mind stopped with all these chaotic thoughts. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah, we're spinning at over 1,000 miles per hour. He said, why can't we feel it? And we got into this whole discussion. My husband and him and myself started talking about, it is crazy that we are actually spinning in space at over 1,000 miles per hour. Number one, that makes you, all of a sudden it's like, well, my problems are real small, right? Everything kind of put itself into perspective there. And all of a sudden I went from the physical to the intellectual to the spiritual after just talking about this and the fact that we're here and gravity's pulling us down and we think that all this chaos is happening around us. And in fact, we are spinning crazy in space. And it was just a shift in my thoughts from something my 8-year-old said in the back seat. And I was like, oh, wow, that is fascinating.
Yeah, well, it's self-induced. I mean, everything, right back to the law of attraction, everything you're seeking is seeking you. Everything, the universe is like a mirror. If you hold an orange up to the mirror cannot alter that image. It will reflect back in an orange, right? And so the universe is exactly the same way. It will reflect. If you're bringing chaos into the conversation, if you're bringing chaos into the situation, the universe has no choice but to reflect that back to you, right? Yeah. And that's just the reality of it. And you're at the equator. I think it's over 1,100 miles an hour. Now, are you ready for this? You know how fast we're going around the sun? 250,000 miles an hour. So the Earth, we're spinning 1,100 miles an hour on Earth, but the Earth is going around the sun at 250,000 miles an hour, and the universe, our universe, is moving at the speed of light. So but people don't get that. They're so myopic on what's going on right now, right here in front of me, that they never take a step back. And it's not to say that you shouldn't be concerned about what's happening in your physical world, because you obviously you want to take care of yourself and nurture and all that kind of stuff. However, it's not the only plane of existence. However, most people don't understand that we coexist on those three planes at all times. And you have most control over your intellectual and spiritual plane than you do over your physical plane. That's where you really have the control. And people that are highly successful understand that. People that are highly successful, because no matter what's happening in their physical world, they know they can always graduate and up their game on the intellectual and spiritual side and get through whatever's happening on the physical plane.
Yeah. Well, and what was so interesting about what happened that day, it was Saturday, is that as soon as he said that and we started talking and my mindset shifted, I went into his swim practice and I completely enjoyed the experience. I wasn't on my phone checking my emails. I was like, this is what life is about, is watching him swim. And then we got in the car and we went to go meet the seller. And it was such a great opportunity. My creative juices were flowing. And I was speaking with the seller about all the different things that we could do with this house and the different ways that we could structure this. I left my stressed mindset in that car as soon as my son said that. And all of a sudden I was just open up to this creative world where I was just kind of enjoying things. Yeah,
no, it's amazing, isn't it? And you have that ability to do that. It's that awareness. It's knowing that when you're in that funk or you're in that negativity, you can just stop. You literally stop, and you literally, you can change your thought in 1/1000th of a second, 1/10000000th of a second. So you can change your mind 1 billion times in 1 second. That's how fast our minds work, right? And so you can literally shift that. As soon as you are aware that a negative thought is coming in, you just shift it 180 degrees, right? And And that will actually physically change your vibration. It will change your mindset. Now, you ready for this? Our right now, while we've had this conversation, probably 1 billion new cells have regenerated in your body, right? When you're in a positive vibration, when you're in a positive conversation, those new cells in your body are being born into the world, the physical world, in a positive energy, right? You don't think that has an effect on you? 100%. And if you don't believe that, you're out of your mind, because that's reality. When you're in that positive vibration, your physical body changes. I've seen people from 1 week to the next come in, look differently, and you can tell that they've altered their vibration, they've altered their level of thinking, and they show up differently, right? Just like you left that negativity in the car, you left that energy in the car, you went into, and people were probably like, they, whether they're aware of it or not,
walking on air. I was like,
exactly.
Oh,
Right. And you become magnetic, right? And people, you become more attractive. Not, your energy is more attractive. People want to be around you, or they say hi to you, and they don't even know why they say hi to you. They're just like, oh, hi, how are you? Hey, I'm great. How are you? I mean, that's the power that we have. And how does this relate to real estate? Well, fear is one of the things that stops people in real estate, right? Doubt stops people in real estate. Confusion stops people in real estate, right? Indecision, right? And so, when you really understand those things, you can start to step out and do things, get out of your comfort zone, right? Well, and I'll be more than happy to share this too. I have a diagram that shows the comfort zone as like an inner circle. And then the next ring out is the fear zone, right? And then the next ring from there is the learning zone. And the next ring from there is the growth zone. So, as soon as you start to get out of your comfort zone, you're going to hit that fear zone. It's just the way it is. And the faster you can get through that fear zone, because fear is a state of mind. When you understand your fear, you're afraid of something that hasn't happened yet, right? And when you understand that's a state of mind, you can change it like that in a nanosecond, right? And so when you get out of that fear zone, now you're in the learning zone, right? You can start to open up your mind to learn, and maybe get mentored by someone like you, or somebody else that like Mike, or somebody that's done real estate. You get into that, you put your fear behind you. It's still there. It's just behind you, right? And then you get into that learning zone. And then when you go through that learning zone, you get into the growth zone. And then you create a new comfort zone, right? And so, in real estate, what stops most people is the start, right? They don't know what they're doing. And so they don't, they're maybe embarrassed to ask somebody for help, or they're embarrassed to join a program, a mentoring program, or a podcast, or something that's going to actually educate them and get them through that learning zone. And that's what I find with most real estate people. I experienced it myself, and listen, Carrie, I know you and your husband write a lot of contracts. Do you remember the first contract you wrote?
Oh my gosh. I just had finished The Secret probably for like the third time. So I'm like, this has got to work, right? And when I got that yes, I could not sleep that night. I mean, they told us yes late at night, and I said, okay, we're going to write up the contract and send it in the morning. It was like I was back like a 5-year-old waiting for Santa to come for Christmas. And I was like, it's finally happening.
Yeah. But you guys probably write like 5 offers in a day now, right? I mean, you could just, right? No, I remember the first contract.
But we write a lot. Yeah, we write a lot of offers and we write a lot of contracts, but I can still remember that first one we did. I mean, that was just.
Everybody I talk to, everybody remembers their first contract. I remember the first contract I wrote. I erased it. I did whiteout. I took like 3 days to write a contract because I didn't know what I was doing, right? And I didn't have a mentor. I didn't have anybody. I mean, it's comical now. And then at one point I was writing, I'd write 4 or 5 offers in an hour. You know what I mean? Because just, right? But it's that first one. And that's the point I'm trying to make to your listeners. If you've never done a contract, or you've never done a deal, you've never raised money or done, anything that you want. If you have a burning desire, if you have a big enough desire and a big enough emotional connection to your real estate business, right? Then you will find a way. If there's a will, there's a way, right? And get outside your comfort zone. Get in touch listen to podcasts, right? Connect with someone like Carrie or somebody that's doing what you want to do, because they went through this. We've all started the same spot, right? No matter where you are in your progression, we all started with that first contract or that first property, right? So get beyond yourself, right? Get beyond your fears, go beyond, because that's what's stopping you most likely, right? And there's very simple ways to get beyond that. And you and I both know it, Carrie, because we've gone beyond that, right? And And I remember the first contract I wrote, it was like scary. Am I doing it right? Am I, am I putting the earnest money in the right spot? Am I writing the right contingencies? Because I didn't know.
Yeah.
Right. I didn't know.
Yeah. No, it's so interesting going back to what you were saying, where our cells are actually regenerating. And I've got to like find a picture from like 7 years ago. I'll have to send it to you, like the difference of how I looked then with how I look now. It's crazy because I look 10 years older back 7 years ago than I do today, because I had so much anxiety. I was worried all the time. I was terrified to talk to people. I did not have a voice. I had so much fear in my life when I first started in real estate, which got in my way, because if you're afraid to talk to people, well, then you're sure as hell not going to be talking to lots of sellers in a comfortable way, right? And it took me a long time. And when I say a long time, it probably took me a year of like inner work to get to the point where I was comfortable making offers and talking to sellers. And that's really when I started to get the ball rolling, was when I broke through those limiting beliefs and that fear that I had that was just it was just like paralyzing.
Yeah.
And what you said, like physically, I'm telling you, when I look at pictures of myself 8, 9, 10 years ago, I'm like, that doesn't even look like me.
Yeah.
Look like I have a lot of fear. I look like I'm a stress ball in these pictures.
Yeah, well, for sure, because because your internal thoughts will affect you absolutely 100%, 100%. I used to do a program. I should do this again. It was 72 hours to find your focus, right? And within a weekend, we would go over all this stuff, and literally it would be a crash course in this stuff. And fear was one of the biggest things we focused on: fear and negative thinking, right? Fear and negative thinking, because those are the two things that everybody can relate to. I don't care who you are. I'm a big Tom Hanks fan. I love Tom Hanks. I read his book. He says, I still get the fear of judgment and criticism before I do a scene or go out on stage. And so even at somebody at the top of their game, right? That someone say, oh my gosh, Tom Hanks, how can he be afraid of an audience or whatever? It never goes away, right? And the point is, how do you deal with it, right? How do you manage that? And most people just don't have the tools, because, Carrie, nobody teaches us this stuff. Nobody teaches us desire-based decision. Nobody teaches us desire-based focus, right? Nobody teaches us desire-based discipline, right? Nobody teaches us this stuff, right? And we have to figure it out. Listen, it took me till I was almost 40 years old to figure out a lot of this stuff. You know what I mean? And you don't have to take, that's why I love young people. Young people get it because they don't have all the baggage, right? And I always say, this stuff is so simple. As a matter of fact, it's infinitely simple. It can't get any simpler by definition, because it's as infinitely simple as it can. That doesn't mean it's easy, because we get in our own way. We allow our ego to stir the pot or to cause trouble, or, we get triggered by other people's egos, right? Bob's got a great saying that I love. Don't let other people's demons dampen your spirits, right? Don't let somebody else's ego trigger your ego just because they're having a bad day, or they give you the finger on the highway because you didn't use your turn. You say, don't let that bother you, right? I mean, right? And so it's really all about controlling your thoughts and being aware of your thoughts. And you don't have to take a year to get beyond your fear, your doubt, your confusion, right?
Yeah.
Some people never get beyond it, and they look back on their life and go, gosh, I really would. Why didn't I buy that apartment building? Or why didn't I get into real estate? I had so many different chances. And you don't want to be that person. You know what I mean? You really don't.
Yeah. 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 Now when people give me the finger, I just go like this. Have a good day.
Yeah. Give them two fingers. Give them, there you go. Right. That's hysterical.
Thumbs up and wave and say,
that probably pisses them off.
A better day. You must be having a bad day.
Oh, that must piss them off even worse, right?
Yeah, well, then I weed out.
Oh, yeah. That's hysterical.
This is great stuff. So, Moose, how can people contact you to get more information and if they have questions? Yeah,
so you could go to info@yourfocusguide.com is the best way to get in touch with me. If you want to check out my website, which I'm embarrassed to say I don't really keep up as much as I should, but it's www.yourfocusguide.com. But yeah, if anybody's interested in anything that I talked about, I'd be more than happy to send him some free information. I've got something called the Focus Foundation. It's basically a quick little self-test about your relationship with focus in the different areas of your life. I'd be more than happy to provide that. And I can also send you a few things like the desire formula, some of my notes out of Think and Grow Rich. We talked about the fears. I can send you that, the 5 demons that stop us. I'll be more than happy to provide that for you, Carrie. And then also the desire formula that comes right out of Napoleon Hill. It's a phenomenal exercise. It works, and I'd be more than happy to get that over to you. And if you want to share that with your listeners, feel free to do that.
That's great. Yeah, because I think that a lot of us need to repair our relationship with focus today. So I would love, if you send that stuff over, I can, whatever you want me to post, I can probably post this up on the live stream so people can have access to it. And then they have all your contact information. So thank you so much for coming on. This was so fun. I could keep going, but I got to go with my kids. And but I literally could talk about this for hours. So we're going to have some more conversations, you and I, and have you come on here and let's keep talking more.
Yeah. I'm the same way. I could go for hours, and this went by like 5 minutes. So, it's really stuff I'm passionate about. And, I've used these principles to get over some very tough times in my life. And I know that other people can as well. And, we all, listen, I don't care who you are, we all have things that happen. And, and these have just given me the tools to get beyond my own limits. So absolutely. And Carrie, great. Thank you so much for having me on. And I'd be honored to come back at any time.
Yeah. Well, thank you for coming on. All right, you guys, make sure that you go on to Moose's website. You've got his email address. If you want to get in contact with him, we'll post some stuff here so that you have access to a few things that we talked about on today's show. Thank you all for coming on and listening here with us today. That's it. I will see you guys on the next episode. Thank you again, Moose. Take care.
Welcome.
You guys remember, you were only one deal away. See you later.